Stephen, can I come back to Eugene's point, which he said he got from me, because I want to make sure he got the right message from me, which was that in one of my books, Re-Enchantment, I talk about the fear that Australians have about Aboriginal spirituality, and particularly the fear that Christians have about the idea that somehow this is pre-Christian or pagan or tainted in some kind of odd way, which gave rise...
idolatry?
What's that? Yes.
You taught that was idolatry?
Taught as idolatry. I mean, when the Pope came to Alice Springs and issued his public apology to Aboriginal people, one dear black fella came out of the Traeger Park Oval and said to me, "A great speech, but it's too late for me." I imbibed the sense that my dreaming was idolatry by the early missionaries. But what's going on at the moment about this idea of appropriation, a lot of the sensitive political minds in the university system and in government, etc., are using this now as a way of avoiding the whole question of Aboriginal spirituality. So I do want to point to this, Eugene, that while, yes, there's always the danger that with a New Age mentality we'll go shopping for shamanism or crystals or Aboriginal spirituality, that's a great danger. On the other hand, using this fear of appropriation as a way of avoiding the whole issue so that there's no coming together between, say, Christianity and Aboriginal dreaming is a very, very pernicious and unfortunate misuse of a very real political issue. So I'm very alert to this in Australia at the moment. A lot of very sensitive and political minds say, let's hands off Aboriginal spirituality because as soon as we become interested in it, we're thieves. And that's not what the Aboriginal people are wanting. As you said, they're asking us to participate.
I think they're saying to us, you go out in the bush and with an openness and a sense of wonder and learn from the bush just the way we did. And so that you make it your own rather than take what we've digested before you.
That's right.
And you've digest it yourself. Yeah. That's what I think they're saying.
David Muljarley famously said in 1996, he said, "We Aboriginal people don't hold a monopoly on spirituality in Australia. We've just been practising it a bit longer."
Hi, I'm Amanda McKenna, co-publisher of Catholica, and perhaps the token female to this whole conversation. My co-publisher husband Brian has previously explained how we originally endeavoured to inject a female perspective into these conversations, but for timing and logistical reasons it wasn't possible. We do intend to correct that in the next exercise similar to this, that we run in a few months' time on Catholica. In the meantime, on the day of the recording, because of time constraints, we had to drop the segment focusing on Fr Eugene Stockton's book The Deep Within, Towards an Archetypal Theology. We have salvaged some of the conversation between Fr Eugene and Professor David Tacey from conversation number 3, which you've just seen. Brian and I visited with Fr Eugene in his study at Lawson on Friday the 3rd of January 2014 to record this further conversation with him. Eugene, one of the things I find deeply attractive in your book is this idea that a theology exists that transcends or even embraces all the divisions between the great religions in the world. Do I read your vision, your intention there correctly?
All the great religions of the world have a system of teaching, a whole set of concepts which are expressed by creeds and such like. And at that level, and this is at the level of surface, what I call surface thinking, that is where we think in concepts, where we think, and whenever you make a statement, it's either true or it's false. And so I say I'm right and you're wrong. So at a level of ordinary conceptual rational thinking, we find great differences between religions, and many of them irreconcilable differences. At a deeper level, you're no longer thinking in concepts, but really thinking in patterns, and you begin to see likenesses of patterns. The question of truth and falsity no longer holds. That dualism dissipates, and at a deeper level, we begin to see similarity of patterns between the different religions. And a lady expressed it to me the other day. She's got this glass crystal with many facets, and she explained how that reminds her of all the different religions. And I expressed it also in the book, that you have a gem, and each facet of that gem represents the interface of a certain religion with the beyond. And all these religions have the same beyond. It's just that they've got a different interface with that beyond. And so when you get more deeply into one's own religion or anyone else's religion, you're recognising things that are similar. And in fact you rejoice that that other religion has a way of putting it, of putting what you want to say from your own. So it's no longer competition, but really an accommodation to each other, which is possible at a deeper level. And I find very instructive, but most religions which have a depth, which go in for meditation, and contemplation, they are more likely to meld together. They recognise each other in each other, simply by going into depth.
What do you mean exactly by these terms, archetypal theology or deep consciousness?
The crux of what I'm talking about with archetypal or thinking, or better still, deep consciousness. Now, psychologists speak about the unconscious or the subconscious, by which they seem to say that there's a discontinuity between the way we think on the surface and something else. Now, people who are used to meditation realise that there are depths of their own consciousness which are not wordy, which are not rational, which are not conceptual. And the more you get used to this, the more the deeper levels come alive. Now, our ordinary way of thinking is what I portray here as surface consciousness. We think in concepts, we express it in words, and our typical statement is A is B. We identify subject and predicate. That's the typical thing. But as you get more used to the deeper levels, you realise that you're not dealing in concepts or even rationality. You're dealing with patterns. You recognise patterns. This is one of the most extraordinary things that human beings can do, by the way, is the way we recognise patterns and the similarity between patterns. Actually this is being explored with fractal geometry, by the way. Now at a deeper level, as I say, you're seeing patterns, and the typical statement now becomes A is like B. And notice when you say A is like B, there's no longer a question of truth or falsity. The dualism that exists on the surface is not present at a deeper level. And this, what you see down in the depths there, what you experience in your own consciousness, is a whole cauldron, if you like, of feelings. And feelings have no shape, but these feelings are the result of one's experiences. And I highlight, particularly in my book, the feelings that we got from early childhood, what are called unremembered memories. And they keep influencing us through life. But then there are the feelings that we get from... I woke up with a dream this morning and a very strong sense of a bully. Now, I had some rather vivid experiences of bullies when I was a child, and that is a very strong archetype in my mind. My mother is another strong archetype. My father, who died when I was a few months old, remains with me as a very loving but not a very active archetype. So my idea of God the Father is probably different from anyone else's. But these are feelings that we derive from our experience. And then during our formation, our maturing, our experiences are also feeding in feelings. Now, these feelings have no form. But in the level here, what I call the playground, which is simply the imagination, we attach forms to feelings. So an artist, you can look at any artwork around here, he uses these forms in order to give some sort of shape to a feeling. Some of these shapes are provided by our culture, and so for example, if you look at Australian culture, look at the importance of, say, the Gallipoli icon, or the larrikin character that's so beloved in our culture. We have a number of well-established forms that we shape our feelings with, and of course this playground is a marvellous part of where we are giving shape to, and this is a whole area of art and music.
Is that the area that some people would describe as the subconscious?
I think they sort of describe all this down here as subconscious. But I would contend against that by saying that anyone who's used to meditating realises there's continuity between the surface and the deep. And Frank Fletcher, who's a very fine theologian, unfortunately he now has Parkinson's disease, but he came out with a marvellous idea of, he talked about the polyphony of consciousnesses, by which he meant to say that there's a continual interplay between our surface and our deep. And look, you take music. Music is simply archetypal thinking in practice. And maybe you can write your music down on a sheet of paper and discuss it, the score. But the music that really exists is the sounds and the feelings that come with those sounds. That is giving shape to a whole set of feelings. And music is terribly important. And interestingly, it's this level here where we find meaning to our life. Our conceptual, rational thinking does not give us meaning. But this deeper level is where we find meaning to our lives. And that's why this is very important in the spiritual life, that the more we develop and nurture this whole area, the more certainly we find ourselves finding meaning to our lives.